nobody understands and that we can't explain. Today, we're judging teachers based on the performance of students that they've never taught. That's not really fair. I mean, it's like, I don't know how many of you are college football fans, but if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't describe the BCS scoring system. And we've got a system of measuring teachers that's more complicated than the BCS. And so I think we need to get a more simple formula that teachers can understand, that we can explain, so that we really attract the best and brightest people to the teaching profession. I had amazing teachers, and a lot of our teachers that are seniors now, we had a lot of great women went into the teaching profession because, 20, 30 years ago, if you were a real smart lady, there were really only 3 career choices for you. You became a nurse, a teacher, or some sort of administrative assistant. And so we got all these brilliant women that went into the teaching profession and generated students that had these great knowledge bases. Well, now we've got more women enrolled in law school today than men. Women have all these opportunities, and so what that's done is we don't have a guaranteed pipeline of bright people in the teaching profession. And so more and more, we're having to go and attract bright young people to teaching. That's pretty hard to do, and they got to sign up for years and years of near poverty to be a teacher. So I think we ought to have a fair system where we could say to a bright young person coming from FSU, or maybe a less bright person coming from the University of Florida, we could say to those folks, if you want to go be a teacher in a rural area, in an area that needs improving achievement, that you can actually make $50,000, $60,000 a year in a shorter period of time if you put in the effort and you put in the work. So that's going to be a major focus of mine, and I hope it's something we can work together on to get to a measurement system for our teachers that makes some sense. Now, the other thing we've got to do in education is another kind of unpopular thing to say, but we've got to get more rigorous curriculum. I mean, we no longer turn out our students to just compete against other folks in the American Southeast. We're competing against folks all over the world. And if we look at the type of jobs that are in the future for young people in elementary school or middle school today, those jobs are in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I got a degree in political science. I tell most folks I'd have done better to get a degree in volleyball, because at least then I would have graduated with a skill. Now, all I learned was how to read stuff. And if we do more, Matt, where we teach people to do like what you know how to do, where you've grown a successful business in technology, if we get more folks into those types of good, clean, high-paying jobs, that can be a magnet in the state of Florida that people want to come to. I mean, in America today, there are 3 million jobs that are vacant because there aren't enough qualified people to fill them. And so if we become the center of that knowledge power, that's a leverageable asset, and I think it can really make Florida grow. So we need more rigorous curriculum in those areas. That's not, most parents think their children don't need more rigorous science and math, but they do. And so I'm going to push for it, and I think that ultimately history will judge us right if we have a more rigorous curriculum. As was mentioned, I chair the criminal justice subcommittee. So y'all mind if I talk about a few criminal justice issues? Will that be all right? Good. Well, last year when I chaired the criminal justice committee, I figured we ought to start with the most important cases first, and those were death penalty cases. And I found out we had a death penalty system that was all screwed up in Florida. We have 403 people on death row today. 155 of them have been there for longer than 20 years. Now, I'm all about giving people their due process and right to appeal, but more than 20 years seems a bit excessive for me. And so I authored and we passed the Timely Justice Act. And it's going to streamline appeals that don't speak to guilt or innocence. We got a guy over from my county, a serial killer who killed 6 people, confessed to the crime. He's been on death row for 29 years because he's been appealing whether or not the lawyer hired the right psychologist to talk about his bad childhood. Think about what that does to the victims and those families. So the average time on death row is about 14 years, and as a result of reforms we did last year, we think we've cut that in half, and I got to keep my eye on the courts and make sure that we monitor that process and ensure that we remove those cases. Another issue in the Criminal Justice Committee that we got to deal with in the upcoming session deals with more of the worst of the worst, the sexual offenders and sexual predators in our state. a number of years ago in the 90s, we passed laws that would keep people who abuse children in the most heinous of ways behind bars forever. Frankly, I think those folks are incurable, so I don't mind that. But it was this long, arduous process. And would you believe me that as we look back today, we only keep confined 1 out of every 150 sexual predators. We're turning the other 149 of them out on the streets. Matter of fact, in the last 10 years, we have released 594 predators who have hurt children, and every one of them, that's just the universe of them that have reoffended. I mean, I can't imagine what you have to tell a parent whose child has been hurt if that person had hurt somebody else and we let them out. I don't ever want to have to do that as a state. And so I plan to relook at those laws, and I don't mind if it's not politically correct. I want to start from the proposition that these folks who hurt kids are not curable, and we should have a more robust system to keep them behind bars forever. So I hope that's something that y'all support me in, that we can do for our state. Because look, it's hard to go recruit people to come to Florida if there's a chance that their child's going to be assaulted. So we need to fix that. Now y'all might have heard a little bit about the stand your ground debate that's going on in the country and in the state. And the Speaker of the House announced a couple weeks ago that the House of Representatives will hold hearings regarding whether or not to repeal the stand your ground law. When we made that announcement, that made me a little bit nervous, until he announced that I was the one that was going to be chairing the committee to hold those hearings. And I'll just tell you what the stand your ground law says. The stand your ground law says that if any of us leave here, walking down the street, and we are attacked, we have the right to meet force with force. We don't have a legal obligation to turn and run. It's a pretty simple law. I'll tell you why I think that makes sense. You know, I think about my 81-year-old grandmother who lives in Drayton Beach. And if she's going to Publix late at night and, going out to the dimly lit parking lot, I don't want her to have to think about whether or not she has a clear line of retreat if someone attacks her. Now, God help anyone who attacks my 81-year-old grandmother. She's a pretty tough cookie. I think about a young girl at going to a college dormitory late at night, and whether or not you want to impose a duty to retreat. Because see, I mentioned to y'all, I'm a lawyer. 97% of us that give the other 3% a bad name. But as a lawyer, I know that when someone has a duty, like a duty to retreat, that vests a right for someone else. So why should we be giving the attacker a right at the expense of a victim? That doesn't make much sense to me. And the data bears this out. From 2000 to 2005, and 2005 is when we passed Stand Your Ground, every year the murder rate in our state went up. Since we passed Stand Your Ground, every year the murder rate has gone down. I'm sure there's probably a lot of things that contributed to that, but I think having strong self-defense laws make all of us safer. And so we're going to hold hearings on the Stand Your Ground law. I'm going to chair those hearings. I got in a little bit of trouble with some of the newspapers, a little more liberal newspapers around the state, because they called me up and said, "Well, Gaetz, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, we're not going to move one damn comma in the Stand Your Ground law," and I think that's the right approach. So it'll be a very contentious debate, but I think that at the end of the day, we have to do what's right for our citizens and for the people of Florida.